The first sign that something was wrong wasn't the dust cloud rising over the ridgeline, or the metallic rattling echoing across my Wyoming property. It was a silence, a deep, unnatural quiet that settled across my land like a warning, a silence so sharp it cut through the steady whisper of the wind that normally danced through my sagebrush fields. I'd lived on this land long enough to know that silence meant trouble, predators, trespassers, or storms brewing miles off. But this silence felt different. This silence felt planned. When I stepped out of the cabin that morning, coffee steaming in my hand and boots already dusted from the loose gravel on my porch, I spotted it, a long line of bright orange stakes hammered into the soil near the southern boundary. They gleamed like tiny, fluorescent insults against my earth. My land, my family's land for 3 generations. At first, I thought they'd been left there by mistake, surveyors from the nearby ranch, or those seasonal construction crews who never could read a map right. But as I walked closer, crunching through the brittle morning frost, I realized the stakes weren't just markers. They were a warning, a claim, a fence line being prepped exactly 60 yards inside my property. Someone was trying to fence me out of my own land. I crouched, gloved fingers brushing the disturbed date, anger knotting in my chest. I had told myself I'd never let outsiders mess with the Bailey property again, not after what happened 5 years ago, something I still kept locked behind my ribs, hidden and burning. But as I stood there, jaw clenching hard enough to crack my molars, that old fire flickered to life again. Hot, hungry, I kicked the nearest stake so hard it snapped in two. That's when I heard it, a distant thup-thup-thup, faint at first but growing louder, heavier, like a giant mechanical heartbeat hammering across the plains. I squinted toward the western sky, shielding my eye from the glare of the early sun. And then I saw it, a dark shape cresting the ridge, slicing through the sky with a deliberate, predatory grace. A helicopter, a sleek gray bird with tinted windows and a company logo I didn't recognize. It flew low, too low, skimming the treetops like it owned the place. And then, impossibly, it dipped even lower, wind and dirt spiraling up in violent gusts as it descended right onto my field, mere yards from where I stood. My hat flew off. My coat snapped like a surrendered flag. Dust whipped into my mouth. My eyes. I stumbled back, arms raised, heart hammering as a helicopter's skids touched down with a heavy metallic hiss. Before the blades had fully slowed, the door swung open. A man jumped out, tall, trim beard, expensive jacket that didn't belong anywhere near Wyoming mud. He strode toward me with the stiff, rehearsed confidence of someone used to being obeyed. He didn't bother shouting over the rotary wash. He didn't need to. His presence alone demanded attention. Then he lifted his hand, palm out, command clear. Stop immediately. His words were swallowed by the wind but unmistakable. I froze, not because I obeyed him, but because of the sheer audacity. Who the hell was he to drop onto my land in a helicopter and start barking orders? My fists curled at my sides. You've got 3 seconds to tell me who you are, I shouted back, or you're leaving the same way you came, except lighter by 1 acroft. He didn't smile, didn't flinch, just walked closer, dust swirling around his boots, until he stood face to face with me. His eyes were sharp, calculating, like he was sizing up not just me, but the land beneath my feet. My name, he said coolly, doesn't matter right now. What matters is that you stop removing our stakes. You're interfering with an active operation. Your stakes are on my property. He shook his head with infuriating calm. Not anymore. I felt something inside me split, the kind of controlled anger that could either build a wildfire or bury a man alive. You're mistaken, I growled. And you're trespassing. He studied me for one long, unsettling moment. Then he said something that chilled me more than the December wind ever could. Mr. Bailey, you're about to lose far more than a fence line if you don't back away. My gut twisted. He knew my name. He'd come prepared. I glanced at the stakes again, dozens of them marking a border I never agreed to, stretching far into land my father bled to keep. Then I looked back at him, at the helicopter, at the arrogance etched into every line of his face. Something was being taken from me, and this man expected me to stand still and watch. I stepped closer until my nose was inches from his. You think you can steal my land? I asked. You think a few stakes and a fancy helicopter are going to scare me off? Before he could answer, the helicopter door slammed shut again, and another figure climbed out. This one a woman in a sharp black coat, hair tied tight, holding a stack of documents in a wind-clip folder. She approached us briskly, her expression unreadable. "Sir," she said to him, "we need to finish before the others arrive." "The others?" The man nodded, then turned to me. "This is your only warning," he said. "Walk away now." "And if I don't?" He leaned in, lowering his voice to a near whisper. "Then you'll understand why we landed a helicopter instead of sending a letter." A tremor of unease crawled up my spine, but I didn't move, couldn't move, not when everything in me screamed that this was the same kind of threat, veiled, powerful, and cruel, that had once cost me something I could never get back. A memory flickered, a face, a fire, a promise I'd sworn under Wyoming stars that still burned hot enough to light my path. I straightened, steel threading through my voice. "You picked the wrong man to push." The woman beside him sighed impatiently. "We don't have time for this." She thrust a folder toward me. Papers whipped in the wind, but stayed clipped. "A new land assessment," she said. "As of last month, the southern acreage no longer belongs to you. It's been legally transferred." Transferred? Impossible. Nobody could transfer my land, not without my signature, my consent, unless someone forged it. My pulse thundered. My mind raced. Betrayed before. Betrayed again? The man stepped back toward the helicopter. "You'll receive official notice soon. But for now, stop interfering. Consider this professional courtesy." The blade started spinning again, kicking up another furious cyclone of dirt and wind. I shielded my face, fury boiling through me so hot I could taste it. As the helicopter lifted off, the man locked eyes with me through the tint of the window, smirking, as if he already knew how the story would end. But he didn't, because as the helicopter rose into the vast Wyoming sky, one question echoed inside me, sharp and cold as steel. Who do they think they are stealing from, and how deep does their betrayal go? I watched the helicopter climb, watched the stakes glint in the sun, watched the dust settle on stolen soil. And I made a promise. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The helicopter's roar faded over the valley, swallowed by the wide-open Wyoming sky. But the silence it left behind was heavier than the noise had been, thick, suffocating, pulsing with a single truth that made my stomach twist. Someone had stolen my land. Not tried, not threatened. Done. I stared down at the folder the woman had shoved into my hands. The edges were creased from the wind, the metal clips slightly bent, but every other part was too polished, too official. It felt wrong in my grip, like a snake coiled in waiting. The stakes scattered across the dirt caught the rising sun and glowed neon orange, mocking me. My property, my father's sweat, my grandfather's bones. And someone thought they could carve a chunk out of it like slicing a piece from a steak? I breathed deep, steadying myself. I'd learned long ago what happened when anger drove without reins. It burned too hot, too fast. It made a man careless. And I couldn't afford careless. Not again. "All right," I muttered to the empty field. "Let's see what lies you brought me." I opened the folder. Inside was a single stack of documents, aerial maps, deed transfer forms, water rights adjustments, and a new boundary overlay that chopped off nearly 20% of my southern acreage, the best grazing land, the only place with natural spring. The papers bore seals from the county assessor's office, signatures from some lawyer I'd never met, and a signature that turned my blood cold. My own, perfectly forged. Oh, almost perfectly. The loop on the B was slightly off. The tail on the Y didn't dip low enough. They'd practiced, but they hadn't known the habits I'd picked up after breaking my wrist 2 winters ago. A tiny detail, but enough to tell me everything I needed to know. This was planned, organized, executed by someone who thought I was too blind, or too broken, to notice a difference. I flipped through the pages, my eyes scanning dates, names, stamped approvals, count annotations. They were immaculate, too immaculate. No government paperwork came through this fast, this tidy, without someone greasing gears behind the scenes. Someone with power. Someone with money. Someone who knew exactly what they were taking. The wind picked up, carrying the familiar scent of sage and dry earth. It grounded me. My family had fought for this land through droughts, blizzards, and debt. They hadn't surrendered to nature, and I sure as hell wasn't going to surrender to a man with a helicopter. I shoved the papers under my arm and marched back toward the cabin. Inside, the wood stove had burned low but still radiated warmth. The cabin was simple, hand-built, sturdy, nothing like the polished, sterile world those strangers came from. I tossed the folder onto the kitchen table, then grabbed my phone from the counter. The screen lit up, showing 13 missed calls from the county office. Well, that's interesting, I muttered. I hit read dial. Campbell County Land Records. The operator answered. It's Bailey, I said. You've been calling. A pause. Too long. Mr. Bailey. Yes, we've been trying to reach you regarding a transfer. I got your helicopter singing telegram this morning. Another pause. Your what? The papers. I snapped. The survey stakes. Whoever signed off on this transfer. Mr. Bailey, I'm not sure I understand. There haven't been any agents dispatched to your property. I froze. What did you say? We haven't sent anyone. And the land transfer is still pending a validation review. Nothing has been finalized. Cold slid through my veins. So you're telling me, I said slowly, deliberately, that the people who landed a helicopter on my land, told me to stop interfering, and handed me forged documents, weren't from a county. I wouldn't know anything about that. The woman's voice trembled now, but I can assure you no official representative was sent. I hung up without saying another word. The quiet in the cabin crackled like electricity. If the county hadn't sent them, who had? I picked up the documents again, spreading them across the table. Every detail, every line, stamp, and signature looked right. But someone had gotten access to county templates, seals, formatting. Someone had forged everything with precision, money, and a level of insider knowledge that made my skin crawl. A corporation, a developer, a ranching conglomerate trying to expand? All wise. Someone connected to the people I crossed 5 years ago. That thought lodged in my chest like a nail. I hadn't let myself think about that night, that fire, that betrayal in years. I'd buried the memory deep, too deep, maybe, and now something was scratching at the lid. I forced myself back to the present. There was only one person in town who knew both the old land laws and the under-the-table rumors, Cheryl Whitman, clerk at the county records office, gossip queen, and walking encyclopedia of local corruption. If anyone knew who was behind this, she would. I grabbed my coat, shoved my hat on, and stepped outside. But as I crossed the yard, something glinted near the tree line, sunlight catching metal. I narrowed my eyes. A reflection. Small, precise, deliberate, a lens. Someone was watching me. I stopped moving, slowly shifted my weight, pretended to adjust my jacket, then whipped my head toward the glint, just in time to see the shimmer vanish behind a pine trunk. Someone had been up there, close enough to see my expressions, close enough to watch my reaction to the documents. This wasn't just a land grab. This was surveillance, a message, a warning. I took one step toward the trees, then thought better of it. Whoever was watching expected me to chase. They wanted to draw me away from the cabin, from the papers, from the evidence. Fine. Let them watch. Let them report back. Because whoever they were working for clearly believed I'd roll over, panic, or run. They didn't know me at all. I turned my back to the tree line, on purpose, and climbed into my truck. If they wanted to follow, let them. I'd even leave the dust trail for easy tracking. But while they were watching me, I'd be watching them right back. The engine growled to life. I gripped the wheel. All right, I muttered. Let's find out who's stupid enough to start a war with a Bailey. I drove toward town, toward answers, toward the storm gathering on the horizon. And as the cabin disappeared behind me, a darker certainty settled into my bones. This wasn't random. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Someone wanted my land, and me, gone, but they'd made one fatal mistake. They'd brought the fight to my doorstep. And now I bring hell to theirs. The road into Gillette stretched long and empty, a ribbon of cracked asphalt cutting through miles of sagebrush and stubborn soil. My truck rattled as it always did, an old beast that had whole fence posts, hay bales, and once, years ago, something far heavier than any tool or livestock. Something I still refuse to think about. The sun rose higher, washing the horizon in a pale gold glow. I kept checking my rearview mirror out of habit, scanning for dust trails, unfamiliar headlights, anything that suggested I had company. Nothing. Whoever had been watching from the tree line either stopped tailing me or was smart enough to do it from far beyond my line of sight. Both options irritated me. An hour later, I rolled into town. Gillette was small but loud. Pickup trucks roaring past the diner, oil workers stomping across the sidewalk in steel-toe boots, a couple of ranch kids chasing each other near the feed store. Normal, ordinary, comfortingly unchanged. Yet today, everything felt different, like the whole world had shifted a few inches while I slept. I pulled into a parking spot outside the Campbell County Administration Building. The sign out front still leaned slightly to the right, weather-worn and ignored. I killed the engine, stepped out, and felt eyes track me from somewhere across the street. Not hostile, more curious. I ignored them. Gossip traveled faster than wind in towns like this, and everyone knew I wasn't the social type. Inside, the building smelled like old paper, burnt coffee, and floor polish. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, buzzing faintly as I passed the front desk. And then I spotted her. Cheryl Whitman sat behind her cluttered counter, reading glasses perched halfway down her nose, hair twisted into a bun she'd been wearing since I was a teenager. She glanced up, saw me, and paused for exactly half a second before narrowing her eyes. "Oh boy," she said. "What kind of trouble are you bringing in here today?" I forced a tight smile. "Good morning to you too, Cheryl." She snorted. "Save the sweetness. You only come down from that mountain when something's gone wrong or you're about to make something go wrong. Both might be true." I dropped the folder onto the counter. Documents fanned out like a deck of cursed cards. Cheryl pushed her glasses up, her expression sharpening. "What's all this?" "Forged land transfer," I said. "Somebody tried to fence off my southern acres. Land they claim I sold last month." She blinked sharply. "That's impossible." "That's what I said." She pulled the papers toward her and scanned the first page, then the second, her brows knitted tighter with every line. She reached the signature page and froze. "This looks official," she murmured, "but something's off." "Everything's off," I said. "Every seal, every signature, every stamp. It's all too perfect." She flipped to the aerial map, tapped one corner of the page. "This isn't the county's stamp. Not the real one. Anyway, the embossing mark is wrong by a hair. Whoever did this, they had access to templates, but not the tools themselves. Could someone inside the office have leaked them?" Cheryl didn't look up. "Someone inside the office could have leaked the whole damn building if a corporation waved enough zeros in their face." "Which corporation?" She shook her head. "You think I get memos about illegal land grabs?" "No, Bailey. But I can tell you one thing. There's been talk." My jaw tightened. "What kind of talk?" She lowered the paper and finally met my eyes. "Rumors. Whispers. A new investor coming into Wyoming. Big money. Big enough to scare the old ranching families into selling. Some already did. And the ones who didn't." Her voice softened. "They had problems." A cold weight settled in my gut. "What kind of problems?" She glanced around the office, then leaned in closer. "Equipment failures. Livestock disappearing. Accidents. Fires." The memories punched me like a fist. A fire. A night sky painted orange. Shouting. And loss so deep it carved permanent scars. My fingers dug into the countertop to steady myself. "Who's behind it, Cheryl?" She hesitated, longer than usual. "I don't know the name. Nobody does. But the man they send to negotiate? Folks call him the broker. Always polite. Always smiling. Always gets what he wants." A slow exhale slipped from my lungs. I remembered the man from the helicopter. The trim beard. The tailored jacket. The calm arrogance of someone used to owning anything they pointed at. "The broker," I said quietly. Cheryl frowned. "You saw him." "I saw someone," I said, and he wasn't smiling when I told him to get off my land. "Oh, Bailey." She rubbed her forehead. "You don't pick fights with people like that." "He picked it with me." She sighed, equal parts frustration and fear. "All right, here's what I can do. I'll pull the real records of your land, make certified copies, and compare them to these forgeries. If someone tampered with the county database, I'll see the fingerprints. And if they didn't tamper with it." She grimaced. "Then whoever is doing this has connections we don't want to imagine, the kind that can push paperwork through without touching a single computer inside this building." I nodded slowly. "How long will it take?" "A few hours, maybe a day." She lowered her voice. "But Bailey, you need to be careful. If someone's targeting you, they already think you're in the way." I leaned closer, the heat of my anger finally cracking through my restraint. "Good," I said. "Let them keep thinking that." Before she could respond, the door to the administrative building swung open with a harsh metallic groan. A man in a charcoal suit stepped inside, out of place in this town, too polished, too clean. His eyes scanned the room, and when they landed on me, his lips twitched. He walked straight toward the counter. "Mr. Bailey," he said smoothly, "may I have a moment of your time?" Cheryl stiffened. I did too, though mine didn't show. "Who are you?" I asked. "Just a representative." He replied, "Sent to deliver a message." "From a man in the helicopter." His smile widened a millimeter. "From those who employ him." I tilted my head. Funny, they could have just mailed it. We find face-to-face conversations more effective. He reached into his jacket. Cheryl inhaled sharply. My hand drifted toward my belt, not for a weapon but for leverage. Always be ready. But the man didn't pull a gun. He pulled a small cream-colored envelope sealed with a black wax stamp, an insignia resembling a coiled serpent. He laid it on the counter between us. "Read it," he said. "Then reconsider your position. You still have time to step aside peacefully." "And if I don't?" His expression never changed. "Then things will move less peacefully." I stepped closer until we were nearly chest to chest. "Tell your boss something for me," I said, voice low. "I don't scare, and I don't run." "Noted." He gave a slight bow, mocking, respectful in the most disrespectful way possible. "I'll inform them you declined the courtesy." He stepped back, toned, and walked out of the building as casually as if we'd been discussing the weather. The door shut behind him. Cheryl whispered, "Oh, Bailey, what have you walked into?" I looked down at the envelope. The wax gleamed like a threat. I picked it up, weighing it in my fingers. "I didn't walk into anything," I said. "They landed a helicopter on my land." I tore the seal, and now I'm walking right back at them. The wax seal cracked like breaking bone. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of thick, cream-colored paper, heavier than any letter needed to be, like it was meant to convey importance or permanence, or maybe just arrogance. The handwriting was elegant, looping, almost old-fashioned. It looked like the kind of script that belonged on an inheritance letter or an execution order. I read it once, then again, then a third time, slower, because every word made my jaw tighten a little more. "Mr. Bailey, a transition of ownership is in progress. Your cooperation is expected. Resistance will be interpreted as forfeiture of all claims. Vacate the disputed acreage within 72 hours. Further instructions will follow. The collective." I stared at the signature, a simple symbol, a serpent coiled around a vertical line. Not a name, not a person. A group, a collective. Cheryl pushed her glasses up, peering over the counter. "What does it say?" I handed it to her. She read it silently, and with every second her expression darkened. When she finally looked up, there was a tremor of genuine fear in her voice. "This is not from any corporation I know," she whispered. "This sounds like a warning before a storm." "It's a threat," I said, plain and simple. She set the letter down carefully, like it might explode. "Bailey, you need to go to the sheriff." I shook my head. "You think the sheriff's office can take on people who forge government documents, land helicopters wherever they want, and send veiled threats by courier?" They can at least file a report. And do what? Call them up and ask nicely to stop stealing my land. I scoffed. By the time paperwork catches up, I'll be sitting on a pile of smoldering posts. Cheryl sighed, rubbing her temples. You can't take these people on alone. A humorless smile tugged at my lips. I'm not alone. I've got something they don't. What's that? Home field advantage. Her expression twisted, a blend of worry and exasperation. That's not a weapon. It is when the enemy doesn't know the land, I said, or the man who owns it. Before she could argue, I gathered the documents and slid them back into the folder. Call me when you find something. Anything. Bailey. I stopped at the door. 7 to 2 hours, I said without turning. But they should know something. What? I don't back down. The door closed behind me. Outside, the wind had sharpened, kicking dust across the street. A couple of bystanders eyed me curiously, probably having seen the man in the chute leave moments earlier. Gossip would be spreading before I even reached my truck. Fine. Let it spread. Fear worked both ways. As I climbed into the truck, I noticed a black sedan parked across the street. Windows tinted. Engine idling. The same model the suited messenger had arrived in. The same model I'd seen years ago. Dark, quiet, patient. Waiting outside a burning barn. My fingers tightened on the steering wheel until the leather groaned. The sedan didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't flinch. Just watched. I met its gaze, if a vehicle could have one, and started my truck. The engine roared to life. The sedan remained still, its polished exterior reflecting the dull gray sky. I pulled out of the parking lot and headed down the main road. The sedan didn't follow. Not yet, which meant they were confident. Or careless. Or both. Halfway home, I turned off the highway and onto an old dirt road that cut between two abandoned grazing fields. The decision wasn't strategic. It was instinct. A place where dust plumes gave away tales. A place where sound carried for miles. When I crested the small rise at the midpoint of the road, my rearview mirror caught it. A plume of dust, faint but growing. The sedan. They'd hung back, waited until I was far from town, then followed. I knew it. I muttered. The dust trail swelled as they accelerated. Within minutes, the sedan closed the distance, smooth and steady, keeping exactly the same amount of space, like they were trained for tailing. I slowed slightly. They slowed too. I sped up. They matched. A cold smile crept across my face. So that's how it's gonna be. Fine. Two could play. I reached the end of the dirt road where two paths split, one leading back toward the ridge overlooking my property, the other winding down into a narrow canyon, the kind with turns sharp enough to hide a truck. And maybe something else. I took the canyon route. The sedan hesitated at the fork for half a second, then followed. Perfect. The canyon walls rose around me, jagged and red, narrowing until the sky was just a thin strip above. My tires crunched over gravel. The sedan moved in behind me, shadowing every turn. I slowed again, purposely. The canyon muffled sound. Hit dust. Hit movement. At the tightest bend, just before the rock walls pinched closer, I slammed the brakes, skidding to a halt in a cloud of dust. Before the sedan had time to react, I threw open my door, grabbed a metal signpost half buried beside the road, something a storm had knocked loose years ago, and stepped around the side of the truck. The sedan screeched to a stop 20 yards behind me. The driver's door opened. A figure stepped out. Not the suited man from the office. Someone younger, lean, athletic, wearing tinted sunglasses and a headset that looked military-grade. He didn't speak. Neither did I. He took one step toward me. I planted the signpost upright in the ground like a spear. Stop right there, I said. He paused. You got a name? I asked. Silence. Didn't think so. He finally spoke, but not through his mouth. His voice crackled through a tiny speaker clipped to his collar. Mr. Bailey, you have been instructed to vacate the disputed acreage. This is a courtesy reminder. A courtesy reminder. I barked a bitter laugh. Your boss stealing my land isn't courtesy. Failure to comply will escalate the situation. It already has. I stepped closer. He tensed. Good. "I want a meeting," I said, "with a man from the helicopter." "That is not possible." "It's happening," I said. "You tell your collective that Bailey doesn't move by threat. They want something from me. They speak to me face to face." He didn't respond. I took another step. He reached for something inside his jacket. I grabbed the signpost. "Easy," I warned. He froze. A bead of silence hung between us, stretched tight like a wire ready to snap. Then he said, flatly, "Your request will be forwarded." He turned, climbed back into the sedan, and reversed down the canyon until he could turn around. Then he drove off. Fast. Too fast. I watched the dust trail vanish. Then another realization hit me, a cold, sharp punch in the gut. He wasn't watching me. He wasn't following me. He had confirmed that I wasn't home. And that meant, oh hell, I muttered. I sprinted back to the truck, kicked up a storm of gravel, and tore down the canyon road. Because suddenly I knew. The collective wasn't warning me. They were stalling me, keeping me away, while someone else was already headed straight for my property, for my cabin, for the evidence inside it, and maybe for me. By the time I hit the mouth of the canyon, the sky had shifted, a smear of dark clouds rolling in from the west, bruised and swollen with the threat of rain. But the storm gathering in the sky was nothing compared to the one boiling in my chest. The collective hadn't just followed me. They'd distracted me, delayed me, kept me miles away while someone else went after what mattered most, my evidence, my land, my home. I pushed the truck to speeds the old engine wasn't built for, every rattle and groan drowned out by the roar of urgency. Gravel spit behind my tires as I tore across the backroads, eyes flicking between the windshield and the horizon where the edge of my property sat like a jagged promise. A promise I intended to keep. As I crested the final rise overlooking my land, my stomach dropped. Smoke, thin, gray, rising from behind my cabin. "Not again," I whispered, throat tight. Memories slammed into me. Flames licking the walls of my father's barn, heat blistering the air, shouts drowned out by crackling inferno. That night had carved something inside me, something jagged and vengeful, something I had buried but never healed. And now someone was trying to repeat it. I floored the accelerator. The truck bounced violently over the rough earth, nearly lifting off the ground at one point. But I didn't care. I skidded into my yard in a cloud of dust and was out of the truck before the engine even stopped. The smoke wasn't coming from the cabin. It was coming from the shed behind it, the one where I stored tools, and now the forged documents, set aside while Cheryl ran comparisons. A deliberate choice. Someone had tried to burn the evidence. But something was off. The smoke was thin, weak, and as I sprinted across the yard, heart pounding like war drums, I realized there was no fire, just a smoke bomb, a distraction. Again, I skidded to a stop just as a sound cracked through the still air behind me. A footstep, light, controlled. I turned, and came face to face with a man holding a suppressed pistol. He was dressed in tactical black, a headset in one ear, eyes cold and emotionless, the kind of expression you only saw on people who'd done this before. Many times. He raised a gun. Instinct took over. I dove sideways as a suppressed shot hissed past my ear. I hit the dirt hard, pain flaring through my ribs, but I rolled, pushed off, and sprinted behind an ATV parked beside the shed. Another shot, another whisper of death slicing the air. He moved fast, professional, methodical, not some hired thug but real trained muscle. Military? Private contractor? The collective certainly paid well. I grabbed a rusted crowbar from the side of the shed. Not ideal, but better than my bare hands. I peered around the ATV, and he fired again, bullets sparking off the metal just inches from my face. Okay, so that spot was compromised. I ducked back and exhaled slow. He was advancing, boots crunching in the dry dirt. 10 yards, then 8, then a click, a tiny sound, but unmistakable. His gun jammed. I didn't think. I launched myself forward like a striking animal. He cursed, trying to clear the chamber, but he didn't have the time. I slammed into him with full force. We hit the ground hard, rolling in a chaotic tangle of limbs and dust. He recovered fast, faster than I expected. His elbow cracked against my jaw, sending a burst of white across my vision. I swung the crowbar wildly, grazing his shoulder. He snarled and grabbed my wrist, twisting hard. I felt tendons scream as he tried to disarm me. But he underestimated one thing. This was my land, my turf, my fight. I let go of the crowbar, letting him think he'd won, then swung my free fist into his throat. The shock stunned him long enough for me to scramble to my feet. I kicked the crowbar away, then grabbed the rake leaning against the shed wall. Longer reach, sharper tine. He lunged. I swung. The handle cracked against his ribs with a sick thud. He staggered back. I advanced, turning the rake like a spear. He saw the shift in momentum and reached for his ankle, pulling a backup knife free. You people don't stop, do you? I growled. We finish what we start, he rasped. Good, I said. So do I. He came at me hard, stabbing upward. I deflected the blade with the rake handle, thrust the opposite end toward his face, and felt it crack against his cheekbone. He fell to one knee. I grabbed the front of his jacket and hauled him up. Who sent you? He spat blood. You already know. The collective, I said. He smirked through swelling lips. They own you now, whether you know it yet or not. I slammed him against the shed wall. What do they want with my land? He hesitated. That was all the answer I needed. Something big, something dangerous, something worth killing for. He shoved his shoulder into my chest, knocking me back enough to wriggle free. Then, much to my annoyance, he sprinted toward the tree line behind the shed. Oh no, not happening. I grabbed the crowbar off the ground and hurled it. It spun end over end and clipped his calf. He collapsed face first into the dirt. By the time he rolled over, gasping, I was standing over him. He reached for the knife again. I stepped on his wrist. Hard! He screamed. I picked up the knife and held it inches from his cheek, close enough for him to feel the cold steel. You're going to answer my questions, I said quietly, or you're not walking out of here. He swallowed, throat bobbing. Then his gaze flicked past me. He smiled. A terrible, knowing smile. Too late, he whispered. I stiffened. Behind me, the deep thrum of rotor blades cut through the air, familiar now, unwelcome always. A helicopter, not landing, descending fast. Dust swirled. Wind tore across the ground. The trees bent in the force of the downdraft. I turned slowly, knife still in hand. And there it was, the same sleek gray helicopter from 2 days ago, landing 20 yards from my cabin like it owned the place. The door swung open, and the man from before stepped out, the broker, his tailored jacket catching the wind, his expression carved from ice and superiority. Mr. Bailey, he called through the storm of dust. We need to talk. Behind me, the wounded attacker laughed, coughing blood. The broker stopped a few feet from me, hands clasped behind his back. Shall we discuss your compliance? He asked. I tightened my grip on the knife. No, I said. Let's discuss your mistake. He tilted his head. What mistake? I pointed to the injured mercenary on the ground. You sent amateurs. His smile faded, and the war truly began. The wind from the helicopter churned the dust around us into angry spirals, stinging my eyes and clawing at my clothes. Still, the knife in my hand didn't tremble. Not anymore. I had spent too many years being controlled by fear. Too many nights remembering flames, remembering my father's scream. Too many days letting other people draw the lines of my life. Not today. The broker took slow, measured steps toward me, as if he were approaching a wild animal he believed he could tame. I admire your resilience, Mr. Bailey, he called over the noise. Truly, but you're standing in the way of something far larger than yourself. And what exactly is that? I demanded. What's so important you forged my dad's signature, tried to frame me, and sent a hitman to burn down my place? His face remained calm, composed, but the corner of his eye twitched. Progress. Your property sits on land with potential, he said. Potential? I barked a bitter laugh. This is high-altitude sagebrush and rock. The only thing it has potential for is growing stubborn weeds. Incorrect. He turned slightly, gesturing toward the mountain ridge behind my cabin. Beneath that ridge lies one of the richest unregistered tungsten veins in the continental United States, enough to supply the defense industry for decades. I stiffened. Tungsten, a strategic metal, strong, heat-resistant, rare, and priceless in the right hands. So that's what this is about. I asked. A hidden mine. He smiled thinly. We prefer the term secure national resource. And your land, unfortunately, sits on the only legal access point. Pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The odd survey markers, the phantom boundary shift, the buyer who never appeared on paper, the urgency, the threats, the helicopter. You could have just offered to buy it, I said, like normal people. We tried, he said. Your father declined. He believed he was protecting something sacred. He paused. But land is not sacred, Mr. Bailey. Resources are. And what about framing me for forgery? Burning my property? Sending that guy after me? I pointed the knife at the groaning mercenary behind me. The broker sighed, as if I were being unreasonable. Regrettable, but necessary. Your refusal forced our hand. My pulse hammered. No, I said quietly. What you did was start a war. His calm cracked, just a fraction. Mr. Bailey, he said, think carefully. Either you sell the land peacefully, or we remove you from the equation. He nodded toward the helicopter. 2 more men stepped out, both armed, both watching me with predatory patience. I exhaled long and slow. Then I smiled. It wasn't a sane smile. It wasn't controlled. It was a smile of someone who knew exactly how this night would end. You're missing a piece, I said. Oh, he said. And what is that? I'm not alone. Before he could respond, a single rifle crack split the air. One of his guards dropped instantly, weapon slipping from his hand. The broker spun toward the tree line, startled for the first time. A dark silhouette stepped from behind the pines, steady stance, rifle trained, expression carved from Wyoming stone. Sheriff Martinez. And behind her, 3 deputies, all armed. You boys planning on filing a flight plan for that helicopter, she called out, because I don't see one on record. Another shot rang out, not at us, but as a warning. Dust kicked up at the broker's feet. He went very still. Step away from a landowner, Martinez said coldly. Hands where we can see them. The broker glanced at the helicopter, calculating. At the guard still standing. At the injured mercenary trying to crawl away. Then he met my eyes. This isn't over, he hissed. Yes, I said. It is. He moved fast, reaching into his jacket. But I moved faster. The knife in my hand flew before I consciously decided to throw it. It spun once, twice, and buried itself in the shoulder of the second guard, knocking him backward before he could raise his weapon. The broker froze. Sheriff Martinez didn't. She strode forward with the deputies, guns locked on target. Hands up, she repeated, unless you like an air-conditioned chest. Slowly, furious, humiliated, the broker raised his hands. The storm broke overhead. Rain surged down in sheets, soaking the ground, flattening the dust, plastering hair to my forehead. Thunder growled across the ridge like some ancient predator waking from sleep. And I realized it wasn't just nature ending this fight. It was everything my father built, everything I refused to surrender, everything they thought they could steal. The deputy zip-tied the broker's wrists, marched him past me. He didn't look back, but I saw his jaw tighten as he was forced into the mud, the tailored chute ruined. What happens to him? I asked Martinez quietly. Federal custody, she said. I've got enough forged documents, fake surveys, and unlawful land acquisition attempts to sink his entire operation. And trust me, someone up the chain will want him silenced. Talking will be the least of his problems. I nodded slowly. Justice wasn't always clean, but tonight it was enough. As a helicopter lifted off under deputy control, its spotlight illuminating the soaked dirt and broken boundary stakes, I felt something inside me uncoil, something I didn't realize I'd been holding for years. Fear was gone, replaced by clarity, by fire, by purpose. Martinez wiped rain from her badge. You okay? I looked at the mangled shed, the scattered equipment, the slash of boot prints carved into mud, then at the land around me, my land, spreading out in every direction like a quiet, stubborn promise. I am now, I said, and I meant it. The truth was simple. My father hadn't died defending a piece of date. He died defending what that dote meant, freedom. Legacy, honor, that wasn't something you could fence, or forge, or take. Revenge wasn't about violence or blood or fire. It was about reclaiming power, reclaiming identity, reclaiming the line someone else had tried to erase. And I would erase anyone who tried again. As the storm rolled east, the clouds cracked open, revealing a sliver of moonlight that glimmered across the wet grass. For the first time in a long time, the land felt quiet, not because the danger was gone, but because I was no longer running from it. I exhaled, the breath mixing with the cool night air. "Dad," I whispered, "I kept it safe." Another rumble of thunder answered, echoing across the mountains like distant applause. Tomorrow, there would be paperwork, statements, investigations. But tonight, the ridge stood exactly where my father had drawn it, and nobody would ever move it again.